The next organ is the pancreas. It's both an endocrine and an exocrine organ. The exocrine function is to secrete digestive enzymes into the small intestine. The endocrine function is done by the alpha cells and the beta cells. Alpha cells secrete a substance called glucagon, which helps to raise blood glucose levels. In fasting states, for example, if you haven't eaten for several hours, your blood glucose is dropping, and in order to maintain the amount of energy needed for the neurons and your brain to function and for muscles to function, we need to increase the blood glucose. So glucagon is produced, and it takes glucose from stored resources, and it helps to introduce it back into the bloodstream. Beta cells secrete insulin, and insulin is very important for bringing down blood glucose levels after we've eaten a large meal. Hyposecretion of insulin, or lack of insulin, can lead to a lot of problems. And then decreased effects of insulin can also lead to problems. So type 1 diabetes results in not having enough insulin, usually because of damage to the pancreas. Type 2 diabetes results in a lack of the cells being able to respond to insulin. So both effects are really about the same because it increases the amount of glucose in the bloodstream. And we call that hyperglycemia. Hyperglycemia leads to many, many negative effects on the body. One of them is susceptibility to infection, and this is because we have so much wonderful glucose floating around that microorganisms are attracted to this, and they're able to grow in this environment quite nicely. Increased urine levels, because there's so much glucose in the body, the kidneys aren't able to reabsorb it from the filtrate that they're producing, and we have massive copious amounts of urine as a result. When we study the kidneys, you'll be able to understand that mechanism better. Increased thirst is caused because of this, extreme dehydration that occurs with increased urine volumes. Another thing that can occur is weight loss, because our bodies aren't able to use the food that we're eating in order to build our body, and so we actually start using fats for energy, and that causes weight loss. An increase in blood lipid levels, because we're having to use that for energy, lipids or fats levels, causes cardiovascular disorders, heart disease, ulcers, gangrene, kidney damage, and damage to the eye, which is really detrimental and can lead to blindness. Also, this excess fat in the bloodstream causes gallstones to occur. The very dangerous side effects that can cause severe and immediate consequences are acidosis, and this is because as you are burning fats for energy, you increase the amount of acid in your system, and that can cause a condition called acidosis, which can lead to a coma very quickly because our blood pH is very important to maintain. If it becomes too acidic, neurons can't function and we die very quickly. So the last thing that we're looking at is the nerves and how they're affected by this hyperglycemia. Nerves have to have glucose to survive, so they have to be able to utilize insulin to uptake the glucose. And without that mechanism working, the nerves actually starve to death. And so we have neuropathies in the peripheral nervous system, and it can lead to coma and death as far as the central nervous system is concerned. Here we have the ovaries. This picture shows ovulation occurring under the influence of luteinizing hormone. But ovaries in and of themselves are a target tissue for the tropic hormones coming from the anterior pituitary, and in turn they produce the hormones of estrogen and progesterone, very important in the development of secondary sex characteristics in females. We'll be talking a lot more about them and their complicated cycles in the reproductive system. The testes are the site of production of testosterone as well as for sperm. Luteinizing hormone helps to influence the interstitial cells in the testicles to produce testosterone, and then it stimulates, follicle-stimulating hormone stimulates the Sertoli cells, or the supporting cells that help with the production of sperm. The thymus is an important gland for the immune function. It also produces the hormone thymosin. The thymus starts off being very small, a few grams in a baby, and it grows to be about 30 to 40 grams in a puberty, young adult, and then it begins to shrink again. It just kind of fills in with fat and disintegrates, and by old age it's back to about the same size as it was as an infant. So it coincides with the times in life when our immune systems are the most fragile, early development and later in life. The placenta is a very powerful endocrine organ that helps to support the development of the embryo and later the fetus. The hormones that it secretes are called gonadotropins, estrogens, and progesterone. It helps to maintain the corpus luteum as well, which is the part of the ovary that is secreting hormones that are helping with the pregnancy. So it's a very interesting and very important part of the endocrine system, which we're not going to go into in depth at this point, but we will hopefully be able to touch on that in your reproductive system later. The pineal gland is a mysterious little gland deep inside the brain. As you can see here, the lighted area shows where the pineal gland is. It's about the size of a little pea. It's very sensitive to the amounts of light coming in through the retina. So it's located along the pathway of the optic nerve as it goes back to the occipital lobe. And it gathers information about the amount of light that we're being exposed to. And using this information, it helps to set our circadian rhythms. And it influences the hypothalamus and the other hormone regulatory systems of the body. So the pineal gland is thought to have connections to all the hormone cycles, and also our mood production. Melatonin is produced in the pineal gland, and these are hormones and neurotransmitters that really affect our ability to think and be in emotional control of our lives. So the pineal gland is a fascinating part of the endocrine system as well. So that does it for the main endocrine organs that we think about in this system. But I want you to always remember that basically every cell has some little bit of endocrine function. It can secrete hormones that affect the nearby cells, and in fact we have a system called autocrine function where a cell secretes a hormone that in turn affects its own function. So cells have lots of mechanisms for communicating with one another. Some of the other main tissues that have some endocrine function are like the stomach, which helps to regulate our appetite and that sort of thing, and the heart as well helps to regulate fluid balance in the body. So many other tissues have significant effects, but they're not always considered a main part of the endocrine system.